Session 44 of the Law of One. Let's talk about martyrdom and negative contacts. Let's begin. Session 44 was completely removed from the original books because it was, as you will see, very personal information that they got into. So if you have the original books, you'll find that it's missing. And that's because it was published in book 5, which, again, recollected everything that they didn't talk about in other sessions. And a session like this one, 44, and also 45. So I think those are the only 2 sessions that were excluded, but I may be failing in my memory. But in any case, those were sessions that were removed, and you'll see why. You know, we're going to get into the details of this session because it does have a lot of information that is relevant, as we will see Carla as an example and Don as an example as well of a couple of things, which I already said. That is the majority of this. It's just going to be martyrdom and that ability or desire to serve without wisdom or without much wisdom, and also the negative contact that we are always having. And what does that mean? You know, are we supposed to be afraid of that? Are we supposed to defend ourselves in some way, attack our opponent? That sort of human mentality. So we're going to get into that. I don't think I have much to say other than this, because this is only book 5. You're going to see a very long, not that it doesn't exist in other sessions or other fragments as they call them in book 5, but you're going to see a long explanation as to why this, or not why, but the information on this session and why it was so important. We're going to get into really cool stuff here that is a lot of good information for us. Again, I feel like this material, being 40 years old, has that quality. And I know it sounds like, you know, it's some cool stuff that Carla almost died. But, you know, I don't mean it that way. Just like I won't mean, you know, when I talk about the zealotry of the martyr. And, you know, I'm not going anything against Carlo or anything against Don and his mechanistic views, but you get what I mean. So, with that caveat, go read book 5's commentary. Jim and Carla talked about specifically this, and Jim, being a very wise person, he had a very good introduction to the session, which I didn't put here, but go read it. Book 5, it's available for free in the comments, not in the comments, in the descriptions. You can go check out that and download the books for free. So, or you can even go to lawofone.info, which is also in the description, and you can just read it there. It's online. So that information it's cool because Jim was there and Jim knew what was going on. You know, at the time, and then with this information, he kind of goes into details, you know, as to why, you know, the application of wisdom should be, you know, I really appreciate Jim's views on the raw material, of course, you know, and his own perspective of life. I just feel like he's a great representative of the Confederation here, and, you know, I really motivate you to go read his stuff in book 5, of course. So with that, I think that's it. Carla has also a long section there, but she's talking about mainly, you know, personal stuff, really personal stuff, like Don, Jim, and their relationship, and her health, which was something that was, it's always stated in her books. She was a very fragile person. So again, you know, go read it. It's important. So with that, we're going to go into the first question that Don has, and that is going to start this up. You know, Don was actually going straight into any other session. As you can see, we're going to see a lot of Don's feelings and emotions here. Not a lot, but you're going to see it. You know, I'll try to highlight it when I notice it. But Don says, the instrument had some question as to her vitality. We were having a hard time appraising it. Is it possible for you to comment on this? And it's worth noting that Don always made their personal questions first, and in this case it was so important that he did. So they dedicated the whole session to knowing this issue that they were having. So Don is basically asking, Carla has some questions about her vitality, but they couldn't, assess what it was. So can Ra comment on it? And Ra was very eager, actually, to talk about this. As you can see, when they say, we scan this instrument and find that we may be of service without infringement due to this instrument's decision to abide by the most careful appraisal possible rather than the most desired. We have been surprised that we have been able to maintain contact on a regular basis during this most intense period of negatively influenced interference. Sexual energy transfers have, at some workings, give this instrument additional vital resources upon which to draw. So here, this is setting the stage for the rest of the session. When Ra is, instead of saying like they usually said, yeah, we see some distortions here and there, and there is, some intention or low vital energies due to LSD, which is really important. Remember, at this point, I believe this was still March. I'm just going to corroborate as I speak. This was still March 28th when they did this session. So we're talking about the conditions of Carla. Her vital energy. And Ra always commented like that, but here they're saying like, we notice how they say we may be of service without infringement. So they're basically going a little over the question, or beyond the question rather, explaining more, going thorough and without infringement, because the instrument's decision to abide by the most careful appraisal possible. So Carla's intention to know what was going on with her body allow them to speak upon this subject rather than the most desired. See, what Carla, this is what's set in the stage. Carla desired to maintain the contact at all cost, even at the cost of her life. She's actually said it in her books. Actually, in the raw material, in book 5, she says it. And, she decided to give her life for this. But that wasn't the most wise decision, as we'll see. And so, because of, see how the balance here, Ra says, basically because Carla wants to know what's going on with her body, we can expand upon this subject rather than, her desire. So, because they measure her desire and her will to know about this, they can expand on it. So, they say, we have been surprised that we have been able to maintain contact on a regular basis during the most intense period of negatively influenced interference. Since they started talking about really heavy metaphysical principles on spiritual evolution, they got into a lot of negative interference. This is where their friend, as they call them, the negative, I don't know if they were from Orion group, but there was a 5D negative entity interfering with Carla. This was also because I believe it was, let's say, Carla was a lot weaker because of her LSD consumption or intake weeks ago. Remember, we're still in March, not even in April, and they started the contact in January. So it had been 2 weeks since they started the contact, and they had already done 44 sessions. They were on the 44 sessions. So that's 75 days. So you figure they were doing a session every 2 days. They were very, sometimes 2 sessions a day. They were really on this stuff. And, that depleted Carla to a great degree. She lost a lot of weight and so on. But in any case, I'm talking about the negative influence that they had, this 5D negative entity that was influencing them. And Ra says, they were surprised that they had been able to maintain contact because of this this negative influence interference that was causing so much distress on Carla and the contact itself. So there was a lot of, I don't know, it was meant to be somehow. Like they were going according to plan, to their soul plan. And so this had to do, again, you know, in the last sessions, as you see, you know, first Don started questioning, like, who are you, Ra? You know, what do you have to do with the pyramids and history and all that stuff? None of that stuff is really relevant. When I started talking about, like, say, session 27, when they started talking about the principles of the creation, like, that's where they started. Book 2 is where they started to get a lot more serious in this evolution stuff. And then they started talking about catalysts, experience, higher self, the cycle of evolution, you know, the densities of consciousness, and all this stuff is really high wisdom. That attracts, of course, as always, you know, if this is how it works. If you are doing, you know, kind work, I don't know, say you're helping your neighbor, lady neighbor, with her garbage every day, you know, the interference, negative interference that you're going to have there is pretty mild or almost non-existent. You know, maybe one day you'll feel like, I don't want to help her again. I feel like I'm doing this, blah, 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 whatever. You're going to have some negative influence there. There's just going to be some nuisance. That has to do with the level of the negative entity that is interfering with you, some lower astral plane, you know, negative entity and so on. But if you start doing work like this, channeling a 6th density positive being, well, like in this case, they weren't even positive. They were beyond positive. They were beyond polarity. That's what Ra was. So it's almost like channeling. I don't mean to say it this way because it's gonna sound, you know, like I'm glorifying Ra, but truly, I mean, they're getting close to 7 density, so they are closer to God than anybody else in terms of incarnation and being there. So, and it's not them, and we're here, we're inferior. We're there too. It's, you know how intricate this becomes. So I don't want to evoke that, you know, that, oh, they're higher than us or any, you know me for equalizing everything as we're all equal no matter what density we are. So I hope that's not an issue. But yeah, that's what you're going to attract. You're going to attract the highest possible negative entities. And that would be 5D. 6D seems to be very confused at this point, negative 6D, in my view, because they're getting into 6th density learnings and they realize that they need to unite with the rest of the creation for them to continue, you know, their evolution. So 5D seems like appropriate for this type of interference. So in any case, the last thing they say is that the sexual energy transfers have at some workings given this instrument additional vital resource. Remember, sexual energy transfer, we talk about that in session 31 and 32, possibly 33, but mostly those two, and session 26 at the end. Really important stuff if you have sexual intercourse, like, not frequently, but if you are right now having, not at this moment, maybe not, maybe yes, but if you have a partner which you're having sexual intercourse, then you might want to know about this stuff, because you can transfer really good energy that they both of you can benefit from. So that's what was happening and was helping, thanks to Jim, who was having sex with Carla. This was happening. And again, in book 5 they talk about that, Carla mainly. So we have more from Ra, and this is only the first question. Ra says, however, this is not so at this working, and therefore the will of the instrument drives its bodily complex. So they didn't have sex, say, prior to the session, or days prior, since this vital energy would last. This instrument has no judgment about the service. The faculty of will, while recognized as most central and valuable, could in this application cause serious distortion in bodily complex of the instrument. May we note that the martyrdom is not necessarily helpful. So here's some more, you know, truth bombs that Ra is throwing at us, or at Carla at this point, or, you know, the trio in LNR research. So okay, so they say this is not so at this working, and therefore the will of the instrument drives its bodily complex. So her will was basically what was driving, the session itself. Her energy was going through her will energy. What was was keeping her alive, basically, and not alive, completely, but alive and in direction of this, not the sexual energy transfer. This instrument has no judgment about the service. So she has no judgment. That doesn't mean like, oh, don't judge anything. No, you have to have some judgment. You have to have some sort of appraisal of what's going on. That's okay. There's a difference when we say in spiritual, this is like basic spiritual stuff. When you say don't judge. Don't judge means in the negative way. But you have positive ways of judging. You want to judge whether, you want to eat an apple or a donut. Oh, don't discriminate the donuts. They're delicious. I'm not. But you have to have discernment. What do you want? What is more wise? What is more appropriate for you? Could be the donut. Who knows? But you have to have some judgment. The faculty of will, while recognized as most central and valuable, could, in this application, cause serious distortion in bodily complex of this instrument. Very important. While the will is the most important thing that is paramount, will is the most important thing in the whole creation. You have will. That will directed without much distraction, without much distortion, will determine your life, will determine your reality, your will. See, attention, energy follows attention. So your focus puts the energy into action. Your will is the capacity to maintain that focus into something. That's why, and I would see this, willpower. I would see this in my days when I was a nutrition and training coach. You would see this, with people who just wanted to have a result, and they would, they didn't have much willpower, so they would just, go to the gym, do a couple of things, and spend some money, throw some money at me and saying like, all right, I just want to do this, just tell me what to eat. And I would tell them like, this is not about what you to eat, it's about what you do as a lifestyle. And they would lose, their effort, money, energy, everything, because they didn't have that willpower. And then you have the bodybuilders, me, who were very strong-willed. Like their will was everything, and that also caused a lot of distortions in our bodies. But in any case, will is paramount. But see, they say, well, okay, could in this application be... In this application means that Carla just wanted to do the sessions. She just wanted to dive in service of this. And, Ra's just saying like, listen, if you want to do it, it's fine. But remember, well, they didn't say if you want to do it, it's fine. But they were taking the opportunity to talk about this stuff and saying the distortion in bodily complex of this instrument can be serious. Basically death. May we note that martyrdom is not necessarily helpful. Martyrdom is all loving. I need to be all loving. Love for everybody. I gotta do things. I gotta kill myself for other people. That is not helpful. Not necessarily helpful. Yes, it may grant you a ticket into 4 density. May. It depends on your intentions. Who knows what kind of martyr you are. Which reminds me a little bit, just to put martyr into context here, because it's going to be helpful for determining things. Couple of things. Who was considered the most, the prominent figure in martyrdom? Jesus. Who followed Jesus into martyrdom? The Orthodox. Believe it or not, the Orthodox Christians were the ones that followed Jesus' martyrdom in one sense, which was the physical punishment and not caring about their life because of God. I'm not going to say they were wrong, but they just didn't get the message from Jesus. A lot of the Gnostics maintained this, and I think these were all removed from the New Testament because obviously they didn't want to. It was against the politics at the time of what should be allowed in the Orthodox traditions, or what they were considering, the tradition that must be carry on. What Jesus said in several, he would laugh and saying, who they're going to crucify or kill is not who I am. You know, they're going to kill the wrong person, basically. And it wasn't that, you know, he had a double or something. He was talking about his separation from his body, like that Jesus that they were going to see go through the crucifixion and all the martyrdom that was later on put into the New Testament and part of, like, you know, the canon on Jesus. All of that was not the real Jesus. The real Jesus was the separated Jesus from the body that knew what was going on. Have you seen monks who light themselves on fire and they just simply die there without screaming and going? That's because they did that. Jesus was at that level. He did not. He was already disconnected from his body. Like he wasn't feeling the pain. The body was feeling the pain, yes, but mentally, and this is really deep stuff, but this is how it happened. So that is the real martyr. You know, the martyr that he portray here as a sacrifice, not the ones that follow as saying, like, I need to punish myself for me to buy a little piece of heaven. That is so distorted from my point of view and my limited knowledge or gnosis on this. So I hope that's helpful, especially because right now, I think this session is so crucial right now because there's a lot of old green love going on and blue seems to be obscure for some reason. Wisdom seems not to be present at the moment, and this is our current state. So it's going to inevitably balance, but hey, I'm doing my contribution here. So let's go on. We're still in question 1. We have more to say. Ra says, we ask this instrument to examine these thoughts, judge and discriminate the possible truth of them, and if they be deemed true, we suggest this instrument release the power of judgment to the support group whose interests are balanced for more than this instrument. Allow decisions to be made without expectation or attachment to the outcome. So this is just Ra giving some sort of guidelines. No, just instructions. You know, saying we ask this instrument to examine these thoughts, judge, and to judge, to discriminate the possible truth of them. So just to analyze, you know, Ra said something, see, and how they say, okay, we said this, but please, Carla, just look at them and discriminate, judge, you know, examine your, you know, the thoughts. And if they deem true, we suggest this instrument release the power of judgment to the support group whose interests are balanced far more than this instrument. So yeah, release the power of judgment to the support group. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of like not relinquish, but also share the power of judgment to the support group whose interests are balanced far more than this instrument. Like Jim and Don with Carla had a more balanced approach to this as opposed to Carla alone. So that's what they were saying, like share it. Share this with Don and Jim. Allow decisions to be made without expectation or attachment to the outcome. So decisions to be made without expectation. That's important. You make decisions without having any expectations. You make decisions without expectations. Without expectations, you will never be disappointed. Yes, without expectations. Have no expectations, you will have no disappointments. Period. So, more to say. Ra says, our hopes may we find. No, let me repeat that. Our hopes, may we say, for long-term contact through this instrument depend upon its maturing ability to be of service to other selves by accepting their help and thus remaining a viable instrument. May we thank the questionnaire for allowing us to speak to this point, for we were aware of the distortions incumbent upon one whose will to serve is not regulated by knowledge or of limitations of bodily complex distortions. So this is it's not the proper use, but this is like a mic drop from Ra saying, like, you know, in this case, the way they were saying things, like so for this contact to be long term, they had to have Carla mature in this aspect. Mature in this case is not in our societal context, but maturing in the sense of soul or spirit evolution, right? I mean, Ra obviously is not being, you know, a teacher or, you know, a father saying, you know, you need to mature. Get out of the basement. Leave the PlayStation alone. Mature. In my case, it was the Nintendo and the computer, which, as you can see, I'm still attached to. I did not mature there. But it did mature some other ways, and this is what Ra was talking about. Maturing in the service, well, you can see, I didn't mature at all. My background says it. Service to others, I don't play anymore. They're just relics that I have, and it really is honestly the only thing that I have left after moving so much. As you can see in this past year in my background, how much it's changed, so I don't know. I'll get rid of them eventually. In any case, Carla needed to mature in this respect. Service to other selves by accepting their help and thus remaining a viable instrument. That means, you know, stop being so zealot, and, you know, allow others to helpful. And they also thank for being able to talk about this. Finally, Don, you know, asked this, and they were really dying, you know, to talk about this stuff. And yeah, you know, they were aware of the distortions that were happening, and, you know, on somebody whose will to serve is not regulated by knowledge of limitations of vitally complex distortions, which means just, you know, the will of Carla to serve in without knowing the problems that she was going to have. So I think we covered that thoroughly. First question. We're only minute 26 and we're still in first question. Don says, could you please terminate this contact as soon as necessary, since we are not aware of the vitality of the instrument at this time? You can see how Don was super worried right now. Ross says, in your way of speaking, our hands are, to a certain extent, tied. The instrument has called upon inner reserves which are dearly bought. Therefore, we have the honor duty of using this energy to the best of our ability. When it becomes low, we shall most certainly, as always, express the need for ending the working. The only way of avoiding the sharing of service at whatever cost is to refrain from the working. It is a dilemma. So, it is a dilemma for sure, because, well, first of all, you can see how Don was really concerned at this point when Ross said all this and said, you know, let's finish the contact. Let's terminate this session right now. But Ra makes a good point and says, Carla already used a lot of her vital energy through her will, not through sexual energy transfer, which was very helpful during the contact. But in this case, sexual energy transfer, she would be using, say, Jim's energy in this case. And because Jim's energy was male, and I know I am incurring here into the male biology, male transfer, and not the metaphysical energy or the vital energy that we both have, which is both feminine and masculine. In any case, to me, Jim transferred physical energy, vital energy, which is true. That's the vital energy that is transferred. Jim transferred that, and Carla could use it. In this case, she didn't. So she was using like her reserves. I think the word inner reserve or phrase inner reserve speaks truly of what Carla was doing here. So Ross says, you know, it's our honor duty, you know, to use these energies that were meant for us. You know, Carla basically gave that energy to Ra, so they wanted to use it. And they said, when it becomes low, we would, as always, we'll tell you. And the only way to avoid this is to refrain from the working. But Carla had the will to have done that, so they were very respectful of her will, and they basically told Don, you know, nope. But then Don is going to say, can you tell me what the tone was that I heard in my left ear when you started your communication? This is going to negative contact now. But yeah, he continued on. He said, okay, since we're going to use it, let's do it. Ross says, this was a negatively oriented signal. Don says, can you tell me how I would hear a positively oriented signal? Ra says, 2 types there are of positive signal. Yoda here. Where's little Yoda? 2 types there are of positive signal. First, in the right ear, and you can see the synchronicity. 44, question 4, 444. First, in the right ear location, the signal indicates a sign that you are being given some unworded message saying, listen, take heed. The other positive sign is the tone above the head, which is a balanced confirmation of a thought. Next question related to this, Don says, are there any other negatively oriented signals that I can get or that I get? And Ra says, this is correct. You're able to receive thought forms, word forms, and visions. However, you seem able to discriminate. So, Don had a ear tone that he heard before the contact on his left side. That is negative. Then Don asks, what is positive? And positive being the right side. And is there another? And Ra says, yes, there are. There is the positive, and then there is, you know, the one above the head. And did they say? It didn't say what is it. Okay, it's gonna come in a second. This is correct. Thought form. So this is the type of information that you would give. See, I got confused with the oriented sixes. Yeah. So the negative oriented signals are thought forms. This is why it's important to know and realize what's going on, you know, with your mind and your body. You know, what is negative? This is the other part that, you know, I'm going to kind of overlap here, since we're not done with martyrdom yet. But this is for sure part of what's important to take out in this session. So you get signals. You get signals from everywhere. You know, you are a receiver and an emitter, of course. You're an emitter of love, but you are also a receiver of frequencies. And these frequencies can come from positive and negative oriented influencers or influences in general. So it's funny that they say that, because I usually have a lot of ringing in my ears, but I never pay attention to this. And, you know, it's cool for them to express this, because the negative side, you would feel. Now, it's not like the negatives are causing willingly the ringing. It's just that your way of interpreting it, you know, your mind is going to feel that. It's going to vibrate there, right? And so that's a tool for us to know if the influence that we were having was negative or positive. If it's negative, then it's like a synchronicity. With synchronicities, you always want to check what you were thinking. Okay, everything can be a synchronicity. It just depends on the power that you give to it. That's why repeating numbers are so catchy, because they are kind of funny. You know, they almost look like they're looking at you, you know, and saying hello, you know. But it doesn't have to be a synchronicity. Why? Because some people may not care. How many people look at the clock and see repeating numbers, triple numbers, 1111, and so on, and they're like, oh, whatever, 1111. At most, they would say like, oh, it's funny, you know. That's it. You know, other people are obsessed with them, you know, looking at them at all times. You know, that can be a little, you know, energy draining. I speak for experience, or by experience. So, see, I'm saying this, and it was 2:22 just a minute ago. So these synchronicities as ears, you know, as ringing in the ears or tones, you can see, you know, where was the influence. You know, if your thoughts, that's what you should examine in synchronicities, I was going to say. If your thoughts were of some kind, then analyze them in the negative context. You know, what kind of influence was I getting there? Or if it was in the right ear, then the positive one. Just one of the ways. In any case, you just always analyze your thoughts and see where they might be. Are they being negative in some way? Are they being positive in some way? If they're being negative, we're going to get into that, so I'm not going to go ahead of myself, but this is just, you know, pay attention of your body, since you're getting signals here. All right, we go on. Don says, is there a reason that I am open to these signals of a negative nature? And Ron says, are you not all things? Oh my God, this is beautiful. So this is what suscitated me recording a video recently in the short videos here on YouTube, saying, you know, you are all things. So to me, when Don asked that, like, you know, there's an underlying psychology normally with our indoctrination of how we should see the world, good and evil, positive and negative. Like, is there a reason why me, such a positive being, you know, may have negative influences? And Ra, you know, instead of bringing you to the point, like, you know, you're seeing negative because you need the contrast or so and so on. The question Don says is like, is there a reason why I would get negative stuff? I'm not saying that Don meant, you know, I'm so positive, but see, behind that is like, I want only positive stuff. And we can go on for a while here saying why we need negative stuff in our life. Obviously, we need negative stuff so to realize that we're positive. This is just how you learn. And you can transcend polarity for sure, where you don't need positive or negative anymore. You don't care about good or evil. None of that stuff matters because you realize the wholeness of the creation. And that is indigo work, where you're balancing no polarity. This is 6th density Atman work. You don't get into polarities anymore. But in any case, we need negative. And Ra is saying, basically, from 6th density, are you not all things? So, you know, this is why I said in the video, and I'm glad I can expand a little bit more here, is that you are everything, you know, and you should know that all negative stuff is you. It's a part of you that is playing that. And you should love it because it's you. It's not separate. A lot of people get into this when they start, you know, their spiritual path. I fortunately never got into that because, to a degree, I would say yes, but not too much to feel threatened by negative entities. Those were one of the first things it just came out of myself. And I actually had a funny dream that caused this, I believe, because after that dream, I stopped fearing the unknown in that sense, which I had like a childhood fear that I kind of went over. But in any case, I don't want to go on with personal details here. But the point is that you are everything. So if you can see the universe from that point of view, everything just becomes harmony. Everything becomes whole. You don't need to separate anything. You will see apparent separation. See, you know, like you would see things bouncing around, but you would see everything as in one sphere of creation. So, are you not all things? Yes, you are. And you will feel yourself in every other aspect that you are out there. And the purpose of this is to balance it out, knowing that you are that. Period. All right. Question 7. Don says, I think that it might be a good idea if we terminated the contact at this time to allow the instrument to gain more necessary energy before continuing. This is my decision at this time. I would very much like to continue the contact, but it seems to me, although I can tell the instrument's level, that the instrument should not use up any more energy. This is so beautiful from Don. Like, oh my god, this defines Don right here. Question 7. Let's all hug Don right now. Ra says, we're responding to an unasked query. However, it is most salient, and therefore, we beg your forgiveness for this infringement. The energy has been lost to the instrument, dedicated to this purpose only. You may do as you will, but this is the nature of the instrument's preparation for contact, and is the sole reason we may use it. So once again, see, Don was so in love with Carla, and, you know, the contact and everything, yes, but I mean, and you can just see it. He wasn't using Carla for anything, but, you know, they were just working together as loving friends. I think the work, like you can see, this is why I said, you know, you can see Don's mentality here. The first question, or the first answer from Ra, you know, caused Don to say, like, all right, let's finish this. And then Ra said, this is what's happening. We covered that already. And then, you know, Don is going into the negative stuff, you know. So maybe the negative influence was really heavy at the time, and Don just felt, after coming from these questions, asking about negative-oriented messages and stuff like that, Ra says, well, Don says, you know, this is my decision. I want to finish this right now, because he was afraid of Carla, you know, Carla's condition and energy. I'm sure he thought about death at that moment. So he said, you know, because he didn't want to wait. He just wanted to finish this. However, Ra says we're responding to an unasked query. Like they're talking, and see, this is an infringement upon free will that Ra was able to do. This is how important it was. Ra rarely infringed upon free will, because Don is saying, let's finish this now. And Ra is saying, I know you didn't ask us a question, but it is very important that, you know, we say this. And then they, you know, ask forgiveness for the infringement upon free will, because they're saying, you know, I know you didn't ask us a question, but this is our view. The energy has been lost to this instrument, used already, dedicated to this purpose only. That energy was used already, vital energy that was used from Carla. So they say, you may do as you will, but this is the nature of the instrument's preparation for contact, and is the sole reason we may use it. So Carla dedicated that energy to the contact, and it wasn't going to be used for anything else. Ra's going to expand a little bit more, so I'm going to go to the next question, where Don says, I'm not sure I fully understand you, or understood you. Could you say that a little different way? Could you say that a little different way? Could you explain more completely? So just, Don wants to know a little bit more of what Ra meant there. Ra says, each of you in this working has consciously dedicated the existence now being experienced to service to others. The instrument has refined this dedication through long experience with the channeling, as you term it, of Confederation philosophy, as you may say. Thus, when we first contacted this instrument, it had offered its beingness, not only to service to other selves, but service by communication of this nature. As this contact has developed, this dedication of beingness has become quite specific. So you can see the refinement here of Carla's will to serve others by doing this contact. So first Ra says, you know, each of you has dedicated some sort of energy and, you know, consciousness into, or consciously dedicated the existence. They basically dedicated themselves to the contact. That's what they're saying, you know, to service to others. The instrument has refined this dedication through long experience with the channeling. So basically, remember, Carla was a channel for 8 years prior to this, to the Ra contact. And that's why they say Confederation philosophy, because they were, Ra belongs to the Confederation, let's not forget that. And so the other entities that they used to channel in NLL research. So they say when we first contacted this instrument, remember this is only like 10 weeks ago, 10 weeks, right? 2 months, 2 weeks, it's about 10 weeks ago from the channeling of this session. Basically Carla was dedicated to this, and then she refined further. As they say, this contact has developed, this dedication of beingness has become, as this contact has developed, this dedication of beingness has become quite specific. So they're going to keep going. There's more to this. Ra says, thus, once the vital energy is dedicated by the instrument to our communications, even if the working did not occur, this vital energy would be lost to the day-by-day experience of the instrument. Thus, we indicated the importance of the instrument's releasing of the will from the process of determining the times of working. For if the instrument desires contact, the energy is gathered and thus lost for ordinary or mundane purposes. So here we just see the rest of the vital energy, what happens to it. Even if Carla didn't, if they couldn't achieve contact for some reason, and Carla had already given this this orientation, this direction, this dedication, then the energy would be lost. So that's why they indicated the instrument's releasing of the will from the process of determining the times of working. So basically, you know, just assess yourself, Carla, when you want to use this, and where, or not where, always the same place, but when, and how. And For if the instrument desires contact, the energy is gathered and thus lost for ordinary. Yeah, so if she decides to go for contact, then that energy is already placed there. This begs a lot of, the possibility of us using, I don't know if you can hear that helicopter, that's weird here in the forest. I don't know what's going on. So it really invites us to think about how we dedicate our day, where we put our focus for the day, what we want to do. You may feel this, of course, if you have some sort of agenda during the day and you don't do it and you feel depleted because you didn't do it, but you kind of like place your will there and you're still kind of like confused. I don't know, something like that. I know it's happened to me, so I don't know. Use with discernment, or interpret with discernment. All right, question 9. Don says, in that case, since the energy is already lost, we might as well continue with the session, and we should very carefully monitor the instrument and be the sole judgment of when the sessions should occur. Am I correct? Oh, that was a question. Okay. Yeah, so Ross says this is profoundly correct. This instrument's determination to continue contact during this period has already extended the low energy period. So yeah, just continue with the contact, and yeah, Carla needs to use discernment. It's basically what they said. Question 10. Don says, this is very revealing to us. Thank you. Each of us gets the signals and dreams. I have been aware of clairaudient communication at least once in waking up. Can you suggest a method whereby we might, shall I say, nullify the effect of the influence that we don't want from a negative source? So basically, from when you're waking up, you get this, I don't know, this vision, this dreamlike state, and you get some influence there by what you're seeing from visions and so on. Clairaudient refers to that. Clairvoyance and audience from audio, so you're just getting information basically. Ross says there are various methods. We shall offer the most available or simple: to share the difficult contact with the other selves associated with this working, and to meditate in love for these senders of images, and light for self and other selves is the most available means of nullifying the effects of such occurrences. To downgrade these experiences by the use of intellect or the disciplines of will is to invite the prolonging of the effects. Far better then to share in trust such experiences and join hearts and souls in love and light with compassion for the sender and armor for the self. Alright, it's a lot to unpack here. It's a very, compact paragraph or response from Ra here. And we need to go into, not that there's a lot, but I'm just going to get the highlights of it. Don wants to know, how can we nullify the effects of negative influence if we want to continue on the positive path, which is of unity? So Ross says there are various methods, and they're just going to offer the most available or simple, which really is, it really is my go-to. So I really resonate with this. They say to share the difficult contact with the other selves associated with this working, and to meditate in love for these senders of images and light for self and other selves. Well, first of all, they're talking about when they're talking directly to Don, Carla, and Jim here, because they're saying to share the difficult contact with the other selves associated with this working. The difficult contact, I'm not sure if they're referring to the raw contact or with the visions that they may get in a clairaudient experience. But in any case, you share it, with the other selves associated with this working. So with the other two, Carla with Jim and Don, Don with Jim and Carla, and so on. And so, share it with them and meditate in love for these senders of images. So for the negative entities, and light for self and other selves is the most available means of nullifying the effects. So senders of images and light for self and other selves. That means for you and others. This is the best way. Just share love and light, with the senders of these images, no matter if they're negative. You shouldn't have them as separate. You should always see them as part of yourself. And love is really the repellent of negative entities, because they don't know what it is. they don't like it. They are afraid of it. They really are afraid of love. And you can see that in humans here too. When they're very negatively oriented, they are afraid of love. So to downgrade these experiences by the use of intellect, so using your intellect by dissolving this experience and trying to understand it in a more, oh God, do I know about that? Or the disciplines of will is to invite the prolonging of the effects. So whatever the negative effect, was meant to do harm to you of any kind, you will see a prolonging of the effects if you try to analyze or to downgrade these experiences, like they say, downgrade. I mean, the experience is the experience. To invite the intellect to try to analyze and just justify and store it in a bin somewhere. That's to invite the prolonging of the effects of the negative influence. So, and the disciplines of will also. That's also to incur in this prolonging of the effects, because you're just going to be willful, and this is what's happening. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm just going to shove it aside. Far better than to share in trust such experiences and join hearts and souls in love and light with compassion for the sender and armor for the self. Very important, because it's far better just to share it, to say, listen, I had this dream and I'm taking it now for us. This was meant for them, but for us is to, if you can, share it with somebody. Hey, I had a nightmare last night. These are images that are sent. We're gonna get into that, especially talking about nightmares and so on. But just share it with people, and you'll be fine. You'll feel a lot better. Trust me, this is coming from somebody who never shares anything. Still to this day, I still have certain issues in sharing, some of my things, and I just go by myself. Thankfully, I have Julie who I can talk to, and I can share this sometimes. But I come from that conditioning, and I can't say I'm really good at sharing. So this is a message for me as well. All right, let's go on. Question 11. We still have a lot to go, but I'm definitely gonna finish this today. So we'll go over the hour. Don says, can you tell me the source of the instrument's dream of this morning that she told me as soon as she woke up? I don't know what dream that was. Carla doesn't say it in book 5. But Ross says, the feeling of the dream, shall we say, was Orion influence. The clothing of the dream revealing more the instrument's unconscious associative patterns of symbolism. This is really cool, because we're talking about how the mechanism of Orion group interference into dreams manifest. What they do, negative entities, this is why I never even, of course, in my times where I was an agnostic, if that's properly used, or atheist, and I just didn't believe in anything, and even now, I'm kind of hesitant to people interpreting my dreams, or somebody telling me that they had a dream and they saw me in the dream, so they have a message for me. I don't take those messages other than just the compassion in which the person is seeing me and the will to serve me. That's all I take. But other than that, it just doesn't seem like messages can go that way. I'm sure if somebody's crystallized, yeah, sure, I don't know, somebody, a shaman or anybody else who there's so much stuff about dreams that are important here, and this is why we get dreams of prophetic nature, which are always Orion influence, never positively oriented. So in any case, the mechanism in which they use this, the negative entities, is that they use something that you have, see, revealing the instrument's unconscious associative patterns of symbolism. I know that's a heavy phrase. But what's really happening here, without reading it again, is just that the Orion group, or negative entities, are using your unconscious symbolism and twisting it into a way that will make you feel fear or feel despair or anything else. Any negative emotions that they can suscitate in you, they will do it. But they're using your own unconscious. That's pretty clever, because you actually have that. You are the dream. This is why also you shouldn't feel like, oh, they tricked me. No, you're tricking yourself because you're unaware of what your unconscious is. And magic, white magic happens to be your using of the unconscious to reveal who you are. You know, this is the tarot, as explained by Ra. You know, it's using that unconscious and manifesting the unconscious that wants to be manifested. So much esoteric stuff here. But in any case, the dreams in this case, they can be manipulated by the Orion group, but it is your own dream. It is your own symbolism. It is your own, I said I was not going to read it, but it does. I mean, the wording is perfect. The unconscious associative patterns of symbolism. The unconscious associative patterns, so things that you have in your mind that create symbolic. Symbolic represents, a symbol represents the meaning of something. You know, a symbol is not a thing in and of itself. It is a sort of a word, a rune. It's a symbol. It's something that is used to infer, you know, a meaning for something. That's why the elite is known for using symbolism. The elite here on planet Earth, the Illuminati, New World Order, whatever, you know, all of the negative human lackeys of the Orion group here, they use symbolism because that's how they communicate with each other. They also insert in the subconscious of the humans, you know, what they want and so on, but this is beyond, you know, the scope of this video. But it is symbolism. Everybody has it in there, you know. It's really black magic. This is really dark magic when they use symbolism that is actually in our collective unconscious. This is really amazing. It's really phenomenal stuff. I love it, but you know, we can't really get into this. Just know, you know, that's just how it happens, and just feel love for yourself. See, if you feel love for your dreams and whatever negative stuff comes to you, that's all you need to do. Just accept it and say thank you for teaching me that, Orion group. You just show me a part of my unconscious that I still haven't untangled, so thank you for showing me my fears. All right, question 12, not 12s in plural, but question 12. Don says, in meditation a number of years ago, my arm started to glow, moving rapidly, involuntarily. What was that? Ra says, the phenomenon was an analogy made available to you from your higher self. The analogy was that the being that you were was living in a way not understood by, shall we say, physicists, scientists, or doctors. So this, I don't know if this is what Carla mentioned in a couple of sessions ago in book 5, that Don had, he saw colors and then he saw, I think it might have been, because Don refers to this experience a couple of times in the past, but it doesn't mention the details. So here we know another detail of this possible, the same meditation and vision. And he just saw, you know, his arm moving rapidly, you know, with light or something like that, right? I forgot already what he said. Whatever it was, you know, it was just the higher self showing who you really are in a way that cannot be understood by physicists, scientists, doctors. Basically, you know, left-oriented mentality. Left male, not left negative. Even though it's, you know, can lead to that, but this is our current science. You know, our science that doesn't acknowledge consciousness, not even consciousness, let alone spirituality. Yeah, that's what extremes will get you. And that's the extreme of thinking that nothing exists but parts. You know, billiard balls all over the place that just randomly do things like consciousness. It seems so primitive now. But I came from that primitive mentality for 25 years, so I know what it feels. Don says, what I'm trying to get at in this session is any practices that we might be able to do best revitalize the instrument, for it is going to be necessary to do all we can to do this in order to maintain our contacts. So see, Don is still concerned about Carla's well-being and what they can do to maintain the contact, but also to maintain her alive. Don says, can you tell us what we could do best to... can you tell us what we could best do to increase the instrument's vitality for these contacts? And Ross says, your experience was a function of your ability to contact intelligent infinity, talking about his meditation and his vision. Therefore, it does not have a direct bearing upon this instrument's vital energy. Sure. We have spoken before of those things which aid this instrument in the vital energy. Yes, that's true. The sensitivity to beauty, to the singing of sacred music, to the meditation and worship, to the sharing of self with self in freely given love, either in social or sexual intercourse. These things work quite directly upon the vitality. This instrument has a distortion towards appreciation of a variety of experiences. This, in a less direct way, aids vitality. So, Don asked, Don said, like, what can we do? What can be done? And he's using, for some reason, his experience with that vision that he had. But Ross says, like, listen, that's completely separate. That was for you. The things that would aid, Carla here are just the variety of experiencing things. You can't be focused on just raw contact. That's all I'm gonna do. And you need time to go out and do things. Appreciation for things. I've done that. I've actually, last year with the pandemic and everything, I dedicated myself to so much learning and trying to get that I would burn out sometimes. I would, from the moment I woke up, and I neglected a lot of things. My sexuality, I neglected my food intake to a degree. I neglected a lot of things, and by no means did I get anywhere close to what Carla was in her will to serve. But I felt the load of this, and it's not good. You need to have variety. So every time I would open myself to visit people or invite people, I always invited people. Nobody really came. It was the pandemic. Nobody wanted to be in your house. But yeah, you do want to experience a lot of things. Whatever you appreciate, playing video games. Why not? Go outside for a walk. Why not? Oh, I'm wasting my time. No, not really. Just do things that make you feel good. You revitalize. These are the things. Social interacting is really important. You have to have some sort of social interaction. Sexual intercourse, of course. If you have, obviously, you are open-hearted if you're watching this, for sure. And if you're negative, then you're just using sexual intercourse to polarize towards the negative by controlling and manipulating the other, or feeling manipulated or controlled by the other. So there you have it, covering everything. But yeah. As a positive being, you want to use sexuality as a means to transfer love. That's basically it. And so they say that Carla has, of course, an appreciation for a variety of experiences. So, this is important for her, or was important for her. She died already, and of course, the contact died. 30-something years ago, 37 years ago, 34, no, 36, 37. All right, let's go on. Question 14. We still have a couple more. Don says, I was looking at the diagram of the advancement of magical practices starting from Malkuth and ending at Kether, crown. Oh, I put, what you're going to see here is stuff that was in the Law of One info that refers to these, the tree of life in the Kabbalah. So Kether is the crown, or the first, and I'm just going to read it and you'll place it, if you're familiar with this. If not, trust me, it's not that important. Don says, I was wondering if these corresponded to the colors of the densities, with Malkuth as 1, Yesod, foundation, or ninth, as 2, Hod, splendor, or 8th, and Netzach, victory, or 7th, being these 3. Tiferet, beauty, as 6th, 4, and so on. Is this correct? This is very confusing the way I put it. Now I realize. So, tree of life, energy centers, what's the relationship? Ross says this is basically incorrect, although you're upon the correct track of thinking. Each of these stations has a complex number and shading of energy centers, as well as some part in various balances. The lower, the middle, the high. And the total balance being, of course, the crown, I would assume here. Thus, there are complex colors or rays and complex charges, if you will, in each station. So, we're talking about the tree of life, which admittedly I do not have much knowledge about. So I don't know about the stations, I don't know what they mean, I don't know the relationship between them. I am really ignorant on this. I actually don't know much about other teachings. But I am grateful to find people who always tell me that everything seems to resonate with the Law of One. And I say, okay, tell me how. So if you're one of those that knows the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, and you see some parallels with the energy centers, let me know. Please put it in the comments. Share it with others so they can see it. Please. So, what Ra is saying is that this is basically incorrect, that there is no relationship in the way that the Don did it. If you want to go back, what I did was just place the number that they are in the Tree of Life next to the name that Don used there. So, go back to that, check it out, and if that's helpful. If not, then obviated. I just wanted to put it that way because I thought it was relevant. I guess somebody would find it useful. Anyhow, Ross says that, you know, even though, you know, your thinking is correct, your track of thinking is correct, meaning that, you know, there is a relationship between the stations and the energy centers. The relationship is basically, as the way they say it, lower, middle, and high. Just like we have lower energy centers, middle as the heart and the throat chakra, and high, indigo, and crown chakra. That's why I see lower, middle, and high, and total balance being actually high would be indigo, and seventh, yes, they're kind of there because 7 is the balance, the total balance. I'm talking about energy centers here, not the Tree of Life. So there are complex colors or rays and complex charges, if you will. There's also a shading, they say, in energy centers, as seen from the Tree of Life. You can superimpose, you know, the 7 energy centers, and you'll see the relationship. So there are some shadings in terms of the stations themselves, as they are, you know, victory. I forgot the other that Don mentioned, splendor, and so on. All of those have a shading, you know, in terms of the energy centers, but how we relate them, I don't know, and I'm not going to speculate because I really lack some knowledge there in the Kabbalah. So I need one of you experts to share it, please, with the people in the comments. Please be of service to us. Don says, question 15. Well, does the left-hand path of this represent the service to self path more, and the right-hand path the service to others? So Ross says, this will be the last full query of this working. This is incorrect. These stations are relationships. Each path has these relationships offered. The intent of the practitioner in working with these powerful concepts determines the polarity of the working. The tools are the tools. So there is relationship, of course, in everything. Just like there is the yellow ray negative or positive? Well, it could be used both ways, you know. Is the orange negative or positive? Well, it could be used both ways. You know, the tools are the tools. Is the heart only for, well, yes, you know, if it's a tool, if you want to use it, you're positive. You don't want to use it, then you're negative. It's a tool. You know the heart is there, but you're avoiding it, you know. It's like mom's calling. Oh my God, should I pick up or not? I used to do that. But no, I always picked up for mom. I always thought it was something dangerous with her health. In any case, the intent of the practitioner in working with these powerful concepts determines the polarity of the working. Yes, powerful concepts, of course. There is a strong relationship, of course, with the Tree of Life and our experience, and there are powerful concepts there, of course, that I'm unaware, but I'm sure, you know, for anybody who studies any sort of mystery school, there is powerful concepts there. That's why the elite, the Illuminati, again, I need to mention them once again, they are pretty advanced. That's why they have, you know, the 30 degrees of masonry and so on. You know, like, just these, it's the same thing. The law of one could be used. I remember getting a follower, a satanic follower in my Instagram in the law of one, and I thought it was like, oh, that's pretty cool, you know. There is, whatever you do, it's a tool. A tool may be used for building or for destroying, so it depends on you. So there is a relationship, again, but it's not like the left side of the Tree of Life is negative and the right one is the positive. But it's a good way to see it, I guess, from Don's perspective. So Don says, as an ending question, I will just ask, is it possible then for the Ipsimus, yes. I thought it was different. For some reason I thought it was different in Spanish. It's a Latin word. Ipsimus. to have either positive or negative polarity, or must he be neither? So ipsimos, I'll tell you what it is. Ra says, we shall respond to the meaning of this term in a specialized sense. The ipsimos is one who has mastered the tree of life and has used this mastery for negative polarization. So pay attention to that. All right, so I like when they say, so ipsimus is this is Western magical, white magic, derived from the tree of life or the Kabbalah. I think there is a note here that I'll get right away, and it says, Western white magical systems based on the tree of life, and is the highest grade of level of initiation. So the highest, it's like an initiate, an adept, right? That is, it's at that point. So Ra says that they're negative, basically. That's a negative way of the mastery of negative polarization by using the tree of life. I am not aware of this magical, Western magical stuff, but be aware of it. People who claim that they are masters of the tree of life and they want to teach you what it is. Well, are you developing a cult or something? What are you talking about? Are you developing a cult for yourself? Do you idolize yourself that much? No, I mean discernment. Just see, what people want to say. It's in their intentions, and you can read intentions. Of course, you have intuition. So keep in mind. I like when Ross says, we shall respond the meaning of this term in a specialized sense, because the term is the ipsimos. Ipsimos means ipsi, self. Simus is a superlative, or something that enhances, like bigger. That's a superlative. So ipsimos means like the highest, self, or the most self, the self most, something like that, right? So ipsimos just means that, there's nothing wrong with that. However, in the specialized sense of the Kabbalah, that's what they mean, that the mastery of it is that. So, man, this is why I love Ra so much, because I love my semantics. Even though I'm not that proficient with it. Don says, question 17, this is the last one. I never covered this one. However, I wanted to include it for a reason. This is their last question for the whole session. Don says, I'm sorry that we got a little off track today. I think the most important thing we accomplish is knowing how to better regulate the instrument sessions. And I would hope that you would bear with me for my inability to select questions properly at this time, or at times, since I just happen sometimes to probe into areas to see if there is a possible direction we may go. And once entering, other than that, I would just like to know, I think he was going to continue going, with that He says, all right, other than that, I would just like to know if there's anything, this session, I think he just remembered about Carla's energy. And he was just like, okay, let me stop talking. Other than that, I would just like to know if there's anything, this session that we could do to make, I don't know, that's poorly phrased. I would just like to know if there is anything this session that we could do to make the instrument more comfortable, or to improve the contact. This is what Don always says. Is there anything we can do to improve the contact or the comfort of the instrument? And Ross says, there are no mistakes. Be at rest, my friend. Each of you is most conscientious. All is well. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite Creator. I am Ra, Adonai. And Adonai to you, my friends, because this is the end. I just wanted to include this because it shows how Don says, I'm sorry that we deviated this way. I'm sorry, he explains his logical, ways. And then he cuts himself and asks, if there's anything to be done. And Ron says, there are no mistakes. Everything you do is perfect. It's just that it's your decision and your discernment what to do. And, your will to serve, of course. And, of course, their ending, which is always beautiful. And I don't include it just to save some extra time. But I think from time to time, I'll just, add it in. as a bonus, because I love the way they say they finish the contact, you know. So finishing contact, finishing this video, finishing this session 44, which is kind of special in that sense. Session 45 is going to continue to be another separate one. It's not going to be in the original books as you know them. It is in the raw contact and the released version, of course. And yeah, it just shows that you'll see also that the sessions are now spaced out by days in between, sometimes a whole week, which was, you know, clever of them. Of course, after this session, they realized what was going on. So, conclusions, pretty fast, pretty clear. We talked about martyrdom, which I said we weren't done, and I think we were in terms of the session, but I have to bring it back here. And also negative contact. Two things there are. If you're a martyr, if you feel that you're giving too much of your life, sacrificing your life so much, or yourself too much for others, don't think that there's anything wrong with you. Think that there's potential in you to create wisdom, in whatever, you know, the case may be. I have been, and I'm not very, you know, I'm not very green. If anything, I feel like, you know, my imbalance is blue-green. You know, but I've seen myself into some martyrdom sometimes, trying to help people, thinking that we can help them. You know, there's no such way of helping people directly. You know, you just put yourself there. But whatever you put yourself out there is the type of help you're going to have. But if you're killing yourself, you're not growing yourself because you're not balancing yourself with wisdom, meaning that the amount of help that you can provide is limited. If you want to enhance the way you help, you improve yourself, know thyself, and then by simple radiance you can help others. So just by sitting there, you know, people are going to see you. It happens, trust me, it happens, and this probably happened to you. People tell you like, oh, I like being around you because you're so peaceful, or so, you know, calm, or so relaxed, and, you know, you just inspire this good energy, this good vibe, and you're just there, you know, you're just like, hey, yeah, thank you. That's cool. And yeah, and negative stuff, just, you know, think about it. I don't want to go too long here, but I think the martyrdom is really important. Just keep yourself in check to see where there is wisdom. Martyrdom is inviting wisdom in your life. Martyrdom is a good thing because it's showing your open-heartedness. And like I say, I would think 90% of the people that I help, or more, are green, open, overflowing. They just want to give themselves to the world. We just want to help, but you haven't helped yourself yet. Go do that. Plus, a lot of people still have many blockages in their lower energy centers. I'm not claiming that I don't have, but you have to be aware of that. And some people are not even aware of that. So, you know, that's important. And heal yourself, self-healing, with your lower energy centers, consciousness, of course, bringing it up to consciousness. Analyze, assess your heart openness, and of course, balance it with wisdom, and you're going to be, you know, in a pretty good spot. So with that, the negative part of the conclusion, or not negative part, the negative part of the session in the conclusion is that just anything negative that comes to your life, even if you feel terrible one day and you feel attacked by Orion, be thankful that that is coming out. It's surfacing out, because you can become aware of it, and you can become wiser of yourself. You become all-knowing of yourself and say, thank you, I don't need you anymore. And the key thing, final thing I'll say, is that anything that you let go, please have a substitute, which we call integration, that would go into your life. So anytime you say goodbye to any sort of negative stuff that you had in your mind, always have something else that comes into. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want your life direction to go to, enhance it by that. Okay? Session 44 is done. I am done today. Session 45 is next. It's excluded from the books. We'll get to that. And I have nothing else to say, but remember, in the description, you're going to find all the links that I talk about if you want to go read book 5, or directly in the lawof1.info. There's also information about how to support me and my work. If you feel generous, you don't have to, but what you have to do is give a like, subscribe, share with somebody who may be into this weird stuff that we call the Law of One, obscure material that is obscured by people, of course, that don't want this to be out. You know who they are, and they are ourselves. So with that, I thank you again for watching. I love you because we are both the same. We're just consciousness talking to each other and playing a little game here for a little while. So just keep that in mind. And love is simply union, connection. It's inevitable connection. Whether you admit it or not, you love me. And I'll see you in the next session. 45.